Hello everyone, welcome to Focus Talk. On October 4th, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence delivered a major policy speech on China at Hudson Institute. His speech generated strong reactions among Chinese. Many seem to think that the speech signals a major change of course in U.S.-China relations. Some even use the term a new Cold War. Today, we invite China expert Mr. Heng He to share with us his thoughts on this. Thank you for coming, Heng He.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So what's your take on Pence's speech?
Generally, I think this is a major change since 1971, when then the U.S. government sent some delegation to China. And the policy, China-American policy, has never been changed for so many years. And this is a very strong signal that U.S.-Chinese the relationship is in the turning point. U.S. actually adjusted the policy for the past 40 or 50
46
years.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so now one thing particularly I noticed that Vice President Mike Pence, he specifically said Chinese Communist Party 7 to 8 times in his speech. What do you think, what kind of signal do you think that sends?
I think it took like more than 10 years for U.S. government to realize that the Chinese Communist Party is the problem. I think before, U.S. government usually call China or the regime. But now it's very clear the U.S. government draw a line between China and the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party. So I think this is a major step for U.S. government to realize that it's not the real U.S.-China relationship, but it's the U.S. and the Chinese Communist Party's
US
relationship
and CCP relations
must change.
Okay, well, we'll talk about in what way, but before we talk about change in what way, I'd like to ask you, because in his speech, Vice President Pence said that previous administrations gave China access to the economy of the free world in the hope that freedom in China would expand in all of its forms. But that hope has gone unfulfilled. So in other words, the engagement policy that U.S. has adopted toward China in past 46 years failed. Why do you think it failed?
I think the U.S. government made a mistake because the hope is based on the experience of other countries. When the economy develops to a certain level and the political change is on the way, because people, when they have a better life and better information, they request the change of the government's policy, especially the experience of Taiwan and South Korea. So the U.S. government at the time hoped that the China will go through the same step, from the economy development to the political reform.
So based on past experience with other countries.
Yeah, but the problem is they didn't realize the Chinese government structure is totally different. It's based on the communist ideology. And this is, U.S. government used to think the Soviet Union's communist is different from Chinese communist.
Really?
Yeah, they thought this, in Western society, there was a concept, it's called the China exception. China is different from Soviet Union and from other countries. So, but actually, aside of even if we think there's a big difference between Soviet Union and the Chinese Communist Party, but actually they have the same ideology. And the purpose, the mission of the communists is destroy the existing structure of the world. So it's the same. The Chinese Communist Party never give up this mission. It's just hide, behind the scene, and they don't talk about it. But actually, it never stopped this policy. Now, I think the U.S. government finally realize the fact. It's a truth, but it's a painful truth, and finally they recognized.
It's interesting. So you're saying that they didn't think that Soviet Union, the communism there, would change from economically to politically. So that's why they didn't even use this way to treat Soviet Union. They just went ahead and directly tried to contain them. But in the case of China's communism regime, they thought they would be able to bring economy prosper in that way to bring political changes.
I think this concept can trace back a little bit even earlier, because the U.S., as Pence pointed out, that U.S. has very good relationship with China before, since I think 120 years ago.
Up until 1949.
Yeah, but until 1949, it is Chinese Communist Party changed the relationship with U.S. It's not U.S. changed the policy, but Chinese Communist Party changed the policy. But this recognition come a little bit too late, like recently. For a very long time, even in the 1970s, U.S. still consider China as different from Soviet Union. And I don't know where did this concept come from, but actually it's been a very long time.
Yeah, maybe there indeed is a special bond between Chinese people and American people. But okay, so enough on that. My other question is that it's interesting that Pence laid out some specific examples in his speech in terms of how CCP has tried to influence domestic politics and policies. So, for example, he mentioned the Chinese Students and Scholars Association. He also said that Beijing provides generous funding to universities, think tanks, and scholars with the understanding that they will avoid ideas that the Communist Party finds dangerous or offensive. So here he didn't name names, but I think Confucius Institute sounds like fit the profile. So tell us a bit more about these organizations and how did they influence the American society?
For the past several years, actually, U.S., no matter the government, the Congress, or the media, exposed some of the Chinese government work in United States. The Chinese Student and Scholar Association is one of them, CSSA.
Yes. And
Confucius Institute is another one. And the third one is not that well known. It's called the Councils for Promotion of the National Peaceful Reunification.
Wow, such a mouthful.
Yeah.
What is the name in Chinese?
It's called 和平统一促进会.
Ah, okay, all right.
Yeah. So these three organizations, basically they belong to the same strategy. It's called United Front Work. Let's talk about the CSSA. CSSA basically is the student organization in United States, in the college and the universities. Mm-hmm. As long as there are enough Chinese students in one college or university, they will automatically organize this CSSA. And every student from mainland China, by default, become the member of this CSSA. And the CSSA is they received orders from the consulate.
Do they receive money from them?
And also money from them. And this is a long story. Actually, everybody knows, but not noticeable by the government, U.S. government. Actually, 10 years ago, I think we did some program on the CSSA. They do several things inside the camp. In those camps, they try to influence who you invite to as a speaker to the campus. And also the teacher, what they taught in the classroom, if it's offensive to Chinese regime or not. They will report teachers, and they also report the fellow students from China. If some students involved in the democratic movement in U.S., they will report to the consulate. So they have this like a long arm of the Chinese Communist Party. But this organizing, even though it's a part of the United Front work, but basically it's not exactly. Because United Front work is targeted at the people not on communist side, but it's also not on the enemy side at the moment. So it's people in the middle. And they recruit those people become part of the Chinese Communist Party's movement. This is called the United Front work. But they consider the student as already controlled by the consulate.
So they're just trying to limit their freedom of speech, right? Or censor their freedom of speech.
Censor the students' freedom of speech and also censor this university's freedom of speech. Like last year, UCSD invited the Dalai Lama to give a speech and they organized a protest, but actually it's failed. So this is the CSSA. As for the Confucius Institute, this is more fit the profile you just mentioned, because they have a fund. And when the university want to have a Chinese language class and the funding, they invite the Confucius Institute. But there's no free lunch. If you take the money, then you have to self-censor. Some topic will never be taught in the Confucius Institute, even in this university. Because if you somebody will consider this is offend the Confucius Institute. So this is one of the reason Pence mentioned that this is the way the Chinese Communist Party influenced the U.S. The campus universities. But this is not only way, Confucius Institute. We know China founded many China study in the universities, especially those.
Are they part of Confucius Institute?
No, it's not. It's not.
So
they just
separate.
They just set grant, and you can apply the grant. And once you get the grant in this field, you never touch the sensitive topic.
Wow.
This being more than 20 years. And actually nobody noticed because it doesn't have name, doesn't have organization behind it. It's just the foundation. It's the money. This has been a long time.
Yeah, I think it's maybe hard to realize how serious that these organizations or tools have impacted not only the freedom of speech, but also the academic freedom.
Yeah, the topic you want to study, you want to do the research on those topics, you will find it's very difficult because it's easy for China to block those people from entering China, the visa or the funding. Once I met one scholar in Australia, and he told me about he said, why I haven't, it's about 10 years ago, he said, why I haven't heard of Falun Gong. I told him, the movement, right, overseas and in China, the persecution and the resistance. It's the biggest issue from the end of last century to this century. And he said, I didn't realize, I said, for any other topic bigger as this, there were tons of research articles and foundations to support those research, but this is hardly ever some independent research. He said, well, now I realize why, because some people just avoid this topic.
So in essence, the censorship has successfully extended to American soil.
Yes, it's way beyond anybody's imagination.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Heng He, for coming and share with us on this. These are indeed very important issues. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for watching Focus Talk, and we hope to see you next time.